December 22, 2026. Exactly 6 months away.
Right.
No abstract musings about the pharmaceutical industry today. We are starting right there.
Yeah.
6 months. A hard, legally mandated timer is ticking down.
Because that date is a true binary event.
Exactly. And look, if you're listening to this deep dive right now and you're trying to guess, Mineralys Therapeutics, ticker symbol MLYS, if they'll maybe get acquired, you're playing the wrong game.
You're asking the wrong question entirely.
Right. Our mission today is to ruthlessly analyze if the drug, Lorundrostat, structurally justifies a multi-billion-dollar price tag.
Yeah.
And we need to identify exactly which mega-cap pharma companies have to act before that December 22 deadline.
Because in the institutional world, December 22, 2026 is their PDUFA date.
The FDA deadline.
Exactly. It is the FDA's strict deadline to either approve or reject their new drug application. There's zero room for ambiguity there. It's approval or rejection, 0 or 1.
And when you have a binary event like that staring down a late-stage asset,
you see institutional analysts start initiating incredibly aggressive valuation models.
Which brings us to the $10 billion elephant in the room.
Quite literally, yes.
Yeah. Seamus Fernandez from Guggenheim Securities, he covers cardiorenal therapeutics, and he actually used that exact phrase in a note to clients, the elephant in the room. And I mean, looking at the landscape, it's hard to argue with them.
Well, you have to look at the comparable-based institutional valuations.
Right, like AstraZeneca buying Syncor.
Precisely. AstraZeneca paid $1.8 billion for Syncor Pharma's drug, Lorundrostat.
And that was just a phase 2 asset, right?
Just phase 2, zero revenue in sight. And honestly, AstraZeneca's acquisition serves a dual purpose for our analysis today.
How so?
Because obviously it provides a baseline comparable valuation. But more importantly, AstraZeneca secured FDA approval for Lorundrostat in May of 2026.
Oh, right. So they proved the concept.
Exactly. They legally de-risked the entire drug class. They proved to the FDA that an aldosterone synthase inhibitor, an ASI, is a completely viable mechanism of action.
So the regulatory road is basically paved now.
The legal risk is gone, which means our analysis must now shift entirely to the clinical architecture of Mineralys' drug, Lorundrostat.
Okay, but see, from a retail trading perspective, this is where I think people get totally trapped. Like, I call it the drag race fallacy.
The drag race fallacy.
Yeah, you line up Lorundrostat next to Baxdrostat, you just look at the trial data side by side, and whoever drops blood pressure the lowest wins.
Right.
People treat it like a simple horsepower metric, just a drag race.
Which is an entirely incomplete framework for institutional M&A.
Because it's not just about one number.
Mega-cap pharma companies do not write $10 billion checks based on a single efficacy metric. They require a foundation built on 3 strict clinical pillars.
Lay them out.
Superior numbers, superior safety, and superior adoption.
All right, well, let's start with the numbers. Because the efficacy data for Lorundrostat in their phase 3 trials is, frankly, staggering.
It is highly significant, yes.
I mean, they delivered a 15.4 millimeter of mercury absolute drop in systolic blood pressure.
Which is massive. But
that's not even the real number, right? The data point that institutions are actually modeling is the UACR reduction.
Exactly.
They hit a 52.2% reduction.
Yeah.
And, for the listeners, UACR is urine albumin to creatinine ratio.
It's a marker of kidney damage.
Right, so think of your kidney like a coffee filter. If you pour coffee and you find grounds at the bottom of your mug, your filter is physically torn. It's broken.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah. So UACR is essentially counting the coffee grounds in your urine. A 52.2% reduction doesn't just mean the drug is lowering blood pressure. It means it is actively halting the physical destruction of the kidney tissue itself.
And halting end organ damage fundamentally alters the valuation of the asset.
It's a total game changer.
But here's the reality of the pharmaceutical business. Efficacy on paper is completely useless if a physician refuses to write the prescription.
Right. If they hate using it, they won't use it.
Which brings us to the second pillar, superior safety.
In
the Launch-HTN phase 3 trial, which focused on the chronic kidney disease population, Lorundrostat demonstrated a 2.4% hyperkalemia rate.
Wait, 2.4%? Because Baxdrostat's trial, the FIGHT-GN trial, showed a 41% hyperkalemia rate.
Correct. 41%.
That is insane. And just to contextualize that, hyperkalemia is a severe buildup of potassium in the blood, right?
Yes. It can trigger fatal cardiac arrhythmias.
So if a physician prescribes a drug with a 41% risk of causing a fatal potassium spike, I mean, their clinical workflow is just destroyed.
Completely destroyed.
They have to order constant follow-up blood work. They're basically hiring administrative staff just to chase down lab results all day. It becomes a total logistical nightmare.
And physicians avoid logistical friction at absolutely all costs.
Of course they do.
So the difference between a 2.4% hyperkalemia rate and a 41% rate is not some marginal incremental improvement. It is a massive structural advantage.
Structural advantage, right.
It means a primary care doctor can confidently prescribe Lorundrostat without turning their clinic into a phlebotomy lab.
Wow. Okay.
This specific safety profile dictates the asset's total addressable market.
Okay, so the drug works, and it doesn't punish the doctor for prescribing it. That's two pillars. But safety alone doesn't, force a global change in prescribing habits.
No, it does not. Which brings us to the third pillar, adoption.
Okay, adoption. And looking at their advanced HTN phase 2b trial, I got to be honest, there is a data point here that initially looks like a massive red flag.
You're talking about the dropout rate?
Yeah, they enrolled 926 patients,
Yeah.
put them through a 3-week medication run-in, and only randomized 285 of them into the actual trial.
Yes.
That is a 69% dropout rate before the trial even officially starts. Like, why isn't a 69% failure rate scaring the institutions away?
Because it wasn't a failure at all. It was a deliberate structural filter.
Wait, deliberate? How?
Look, if an executive team's only goal is to just appease the FDA and secure a fast approval, they optimize their trial design for sheer volume.
Right, just get bodies in the door.
Exactly. They want as many randomized patients as possible to power their statistical models. But Mineralys deliberately handicapped their own trial volume by utilizing 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, ABPM.
Okay, ABPM, which makes sense, actually, because that filters out all the noise.
It filters out the easy cases.
Yeah, because if a patient comes into a clinic, they might just have white coat syndrome, right?
Huh.
Their blood pressure spikes simply because they're anxious about being at the doctor's office.
Precisely. And if you base your trial on those patients, the FDA will eventually realize your drug is only treating anxiety, not clinical hypertension.
Right. So by strapping a 24-hour continuous monitor to the patient, you wash all of that out.
You do?
So this really isn't a drag race. This is Navy SEAL selection.
That is a very accurate way to put it.
You intentionally designed this brutal 3-week gauntlet so that the remaining 285 patients are the absolute hardest, most genuinely treatment-resistant cases on Earth.
And if your drug works on them?
It works on anyone.
The clinical terminology for that is generating real-world evidence rather than mere regulatory data. It mimics the exact highly resistant patient profile that a cardiologist struggles with every single day.
That's brilliant.
But the trial design is merely step one of a much larger interconnected strategy. To really understand the institutional interest here, we have to trace who was actually running this trial.
Right. The lead author was Dr. Luke Laffin. He's the co-director of the Center for Blood Pressure Disorders at the Cleveland Clinic.
Yes.
And he was working alongside Dr. Stephen Nissen.
Correct. And these aren't just influential doctors.
No, these are the specific individuals who sit on the committees that write the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association clinical guidelines.
Exactly. You have to understand that FDA approval only dictates what a company is legally permitted to market.
Right.
The ACC and AHA guideline committees dictate what a physician is professionally mandated to prescribe.
Oh, wow. So by embedding Laffin and Nissen into the architecture of the trial from day one, Mineralys wasn't just collecting data.
No, they were surgically placing Lorundrostat's evidence into the professional networks of the ultimate decision makers.
Which perfectly sets up the psychological masterpiece of Step 3.
The launch.
Yeah. March 29, 2025. Mineralys presents the advanced HTN data at the ACC late-breaking clinical trial session, literally the biggest stage in cardiology.
Then on the exact same day.
The peer-reviewed paper is published in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yes.
Think about the psychology of a cardiologist sitting in that audience. Usually, they hear a great presentation, they go back to their clinic, they forget about the drug, and they wait 6 months for the peer-reviewed paper to actually validate what they heard.
It's a slow adoption curve.
Right. But by dropping the NEJM paper simultaneously, Mineralys completely removes the friction of doubt. The cardiologist can walk out of that keynote and immediately change their prescribing habits the very next morning.
In institutional finance, we refer to this entire 3-step sequence as a guideline inclusion architecture.
Guideline inclusion architecture, I like that.
It's the stringent ABPM trial design, the Cleveland Clinic partnership, and that simultaneous ACC and NEJM launch. It is a highly engineered sequence designed to completely bypass the traditional adoption curve.
You just skip the line.
Exactly. The goal is to ensure Lorundrostat does not enter the market as merely another alternative medication, but as the immediate mandated standard of care.
Which, for an acquirer, is infinitely more valuable than just buying a standalone drug.
They are purchasing a pre-built commercial bridge.
They use the exact playbook from the Paradigm-HF trial, the one that turned Entresto into a global standard.
They did.
And you can actually see the institutions picking up on these breadcrumbs. Like, let's look at the Indio 2026 presentation.
Ah, the heart failure data.
Yeah. Mineralys released this exploratory data showing significant reductions in NT-proBNP, which is a well-known biomarker for heart failure. But wait, they aren't actually running a phase 3 heart failure trials, right?
No, they are not.
So what is the purpose of floating this data? Is it some sort of secret weapon?
We must remain clinically detached here. There is absolutely no FDA-approvable heart failure data set for Lorundrostat.
Right.
The Indo data is strictly exploratory. However, in an institutional net present value model, which is the mathematical framework used for multi-billion-dollar M&A, this data functions as an optionality premium.
An optionality premium.
Yeah.
Okay, so the core valuation is built entirely on the hypertension and chronic kidney disease markets.
Yes.
But if an acquirer assigns, say, even a 15 or 20% probability of a future heart failure label expansion down the line, that probability suddenly adds hundreds of millions of dollars to the asset's net present value on paper.
Exactly. It gives a mega-cap pharma company the mathematical justification to outbid a rival by $500 million at the negotiating table.
It creates the financial cover to win a bidding war.
Yes, and we actually have explicit confirmation that this entire architecture was intentional.
Right, from the earnings call.
During the Q1 2026 earnings call, analysts from Bank of America, Stifel, Wells Fargo, and Cowen systematically cornered the CEO.
They really did.
Across 4 separate exchanges, he was practically forced to confirm that this commercial infrastructure was meticulously reverse-engineered over a 4-year period.
The exchange with the Wells Fargo analyst was incredibly revealing.
It was the most critical moment of the call.
Yeah, they got the CEO to confirm that the chronic kidney disease data could physically appear in the FDA product label itself.
Which is massive.
It really is, because the label isn't just some marketing brochure. It is the legal foundation for insurance coverage.
Correct. If CKD is in the label, insurers structure their formulary access around it.
Creating day one structural differentiation from Lorundrostat.
It solidifies an impenetrable commercial moat.
Yeah.
And furthermore, if you monitor the CEO-specific language over the past year, it aligns perfectly with the legal communication patterns of an executive operating under an active M&A non-disclosure agreement.
Oh, it is a textbook progression. Let me lay this out.
Go ahead.
So in Q3 2025, CEO John Congleton states verbatim, "We have not had a for sale sign in front of this company."
A categorical denial.
Right. Then in Q1 2026, after the phase 3 data is locked, his language pivots entirely. He suddenly tells analysts he is not in a position to provide color on strategic alternatives.
He moves from a hard no to total legal silence.
Yes. And then consider June 9, 2026 at the Goldman Sachs Healthcare Conference. He's speaking to an elite institutional audience, and he casually remarks, "If someday a company wanted to acquire us."
A conditional acknowledgement.
Right. And executives do not just casually muse about acquisitions at Goldman Sachs.
Every syllable is vetted by corporate counsel.
Exactly. Moving from categorical denial to legal silence and finally to a conditional acknowledgement. That is the behavioral footprint of active, closed-door due diligence.
Which is further corroborated by the highly anomalous market activity we saw on Friday, June 26, 2026.
Right. The VWAP signal. We saw this bizarre, massive upward price movement on huge volume right at the market closes. And there were zero public news catalysts.
None at all.
Putting on my trader hat for a second, that looks like a whale surfacing for a split second.
It is the distinct signature of algorithmic VWAP accumulation. Volume-weighted average price.
Right.
When institutional funds are operating on a finite timeline, such as a legally mandated December 22 PDUFA date, they cannot execute large block trades.
Because it would spike the price and ruin their own entry cost.
Precisely. Instead, they deploy algorithms that slice massive orders into microtrades executed continuously over weeks.
So how does a hidden algorithm suddenly print a massive spike on a random Friday afternoon?
It is driven by end-of-week settlement mechanics. Options expire, weekly books must be squared, and market makers are forced to physically deliver shares.
Ah, I see.
The hidden algorithms are forced to clear their balance sheets at the closing cross, so they momentarily breach the surface.
And the retail market just interprets the lack of daily press releases as apathy.
Yes. But an institutional analyst sees cold, disciplined algorithmic accumulation ahead of a known binary deadline.
Wow. And this brings us right back to Seamus Fernandez and his elephant in the room note. Fernandez actually proved this exact thesis before.
With Cidara Therapeutics.
Right, CDTX. In May 2025, he modeled a highly specific acquisition target for Cidara. The broader market completely ignored it. But 6 months later, Merck bought them out, and it handed investors an 800% return.
And his modeled price target was the exact acquisition price.
He understood what the asset was worth to an acquirer way before the public market recognized the structural necessity.
Which brings our analysis to the final critical variable today.
Who writes the check?
Exactly. If the guideline inclusion architecture is locked and the valuation math checks out, who are the strategic actors actually motivated to write a $10 billion check?
Right, because just grouping them all together as big pharma completely obscures what's really happening behind the scenes.
It does. We have identified 3 distinct mega-cap acquirers, each operating with a completely different structural motivation.
Okay, let's break them down. Let's begin with Novartis.
Novartis is what I classify as the strategically inevitable acquirer.
Strategically inevitable because of Entresto.
Yes. Their flagship cardiovascular drug, Entresto, is staring down a massive patent cliff between 2025 and 2028.
I mean, we are talking about the rapid erosion of nearly $7 billion in peak annual revenue. The second generic competitors flood the market.
It's a staggering loss of revenue, but more importantly, they possess a fully deployed global cardiovascular commercial infrastructure.
Right.
Thousands of sales representatives, deep hospital relationships, entrenched formulary access. When those Entresto patents expire, that entire global machine will be holding empty bags.
They will have literally nothing novel to sell.
Nothing. But Lorundrostat's 3-layer prescriber architecture targeting primary care, cardiology, and nephrology maps flawlessly onto Novartis's existing infrastructure.
So for Novartis, acquiring MLYS is just plug-and-play revenue replacement.
Exactly. It is a Type B strategic necessity. The cost of acquiring the asset is high, certainly, but the cost of not having it is structural divisional collapse.
Man. Okay, so that's Novartis. Then we have Merck, and I look at Merck as the diversification buyer.
A very different motivation.
Totally different. Merck isn't facing a cardiovascular cliff. They're facing the Keytruda cliff.
Yes, their oncology flagship.
Right. Keytruda generates around $25 billion a year. That is over 40% of their entire total revenue. And their U.S. patents face a cliff starting in 2028.
Which creates an immediate corporate imperative, demanded by their shareholders, frankly. Merck has to aggressively diversify their revenue streams away from oncology before those biosimilars arrive.
And Cardinal Therapeutics represents one of the largest available non-oncology markets out there.
Furthermore, Merck already possesses existing commercial infrastructure in this specific space.
Through Adempas, right, their pulmonary hypertension drug.
Exactly. And Lorundrostat's chronic kidney disease data overlaps perfectly with Merck's patient access channels.
So by acquiring a Phase 3 complete asset in 2026, Merck essentially buys themselves 2 full years to spin up the revenue engine and integrate the drug into their system before the Keytruda cliff truly detonates in 2028.
It is operationally optimal for them. It's the perfect timeline for pipeline diversification.
Okay, so Novartis needs it to survive, Merck needs it to diversify, but the introduction of a third strategic actor changes the entire dynamic of the negotiation.
It changes everything, and that actor is Pfizer.
Pfizer, the aggressive preemptor.
Yes.
I mean, Pfizer has been on an absolute M&A tear lately. They've deployed over $65 billion across companies like Seagen, Arena, and Global Blood Therapeutics.
They have massive capital to deploy.
And they are facing their own devastating patent cliff with Eliquis, which represents roughly $12 billion in annual revenue at risk.
And Pfizer undoubtedly has the cardiovascular commercial infrastructure ready to deploy immediately. But in institutional M&A at this scale, we must introduce a final critical concept here.
Preemption risk.
Preemption risk, yes.
Meaning their primary motivation isn't strictly capturing the revenue for themselves, but rather ensuring nobody else can have it.
Precisely. Pfizer's defining characteristic as a serial acquirer is execution velocity. They move aggressively to clear the board. The operational terror for Pfizer's executive team is not just losing their Eliquis revenue, it is allowing Novartis or Merck to acquire the absolute last de-risked independent aldosterone synthase inhibitor asset available.
Because if Novartis secures Lorundrostat, Pfizer is structurally locked out of the cardiorenal future for a decade.
Exactly. For Pfizer, inaction is the most expensive possible option. In competitive M&A, the most aggressive buyer moves first specifically to preempt their rivals.
So synthesizing this entire landscape for you, the competitive urgency here is absolute.
It is at a boiling point.
You have Novartis, Merck, and Pfizer, three pharmaceutical titans on a direct collision course. They're all staring down multi-billion-dollar patent cliffs between 2025 and 2028.
They are all desperate for late-stage, de-risked revenue.
And sitting right in the center of the table is MLYS, the final independent asset capable of plugging the massive holes in their respective ships.
And the timer hits 0 on December 22, 2026.
The PDUFA date.
The structural forces are completely aligned. Which leads to one final cold truth you really must consider as you evaluate this landscape. When a drug's trial design, its clinical network at the Cleveland Clinic, and its FDA label strategy are this meticulously reverse-engineered over 4 years to fit perfectly into the M&A models of 3 desperate mega-cap pharma companies. Are these companies actually acquiring a medical breakthrough? Or are they simply purchasing a pre-approved turnkey commercial monopoly? And what does that imply for the future of how medical innovation is funded?